A total obsession, indeed. 7 days. What began as a narrative of aspiration, a mother striving to reclaim a lost piece of herself, Lauren Robinson, a 29-year-old devoted to her 4 children, had long endured the physical fallout of a failed surgery. The scars and lingering resentment, combined with a longing for restoration, led her to a choice that would prove fatal. She journeyed to Matamoros, Mexico, documenting every hopeful milestone of the procedure on social media. Yet, a routine effort to regain her confidence would soon spiral into an unforeseen nightmare. Weeks later, Robinson was plagued by debilitating migraines, nausea, and acute light sensitivity. Medical experts eventually identified the culprit: fungal meningitis, a lethal infection traced back to tainted anesthetic tools within the Mexican clinic. More disturbing was the growing list of victims suffering similar fates. Her condition rapidly deteriorated. By the time she reached emergency care, the window for survival had closed. A routine pursuit of wellness became a grim lesson in the fragility of trust and clinical failure. To grasp the true gravity of this loss, we must look at the woman Lauren was before the crossing. Prior to the tragedy, she arrived in Matamoros for liposuction and body contouring. $3,000 a fee she ultimately paid with her very existence. Born in 1994, she was raised in Vidor, Texas, a community built on family ties. From her earliest years, Robinson's identity was defined by her familial devotion. Raised on faith and resilience, she was a mother of 4 by her late 20s. Those who knew her described a woman whose entire world revolved around her children. She was the parent who never missed a school event, who prioritized every celebration, and worked tirelessly to maintain a nurturing home. To her husband, she was the household anchor, providing both stability and light. Educated in Vidor, she remained deeply tethered to her childhood roots. Repeat the process. It extinguished. The flame is out. Extinguish that fire immediately. Proceed. The heat is becoming intense. Indeed. While her career remained private, her status as a mother was her defining role. She is remembered as someone who handled the trials of parenthood with humor and grit. Her decision to seek corrective surgery in early 2023 was not uncommon. A previous botched procedure had left her physically scarred and emotionally drained. Refusing to live with the damage, she pursued a path toward physical correction, seeking to reclaim both her body and her fractured self-esteem. This act of self-care would inadvertently expose her to a lethal, unforeseen risk. Like many, she wanted to feel whole again after years of focusing on others. Medical tourism. Seeking treatment abroad had become an increasingly popular trend, especially in border towns like Matamoros, where costs were lower. For Robinson, it seemed logical. She trusted the facility and anticipated a safe return to her family. But her quest for a better life would instead culminate in a horrific ending. A life cut short by tragedy. The whispers are spreading through the streets and the shadows behind. To be clear, external opinions are irrelevant. Let them keep talking. By February 2023, she had reached Matamoros, just across the Texas border, for her elective surgery. Her online posts served as a record of her hope. Snapshots of a final family vacation and selfies taken during the drive toward the surgical center projected a false sense of security and hope. These images now exist as haunting fragments of a lost future. Convinced of the medical staff's expertise, she had no inkling that her trust was tragically misplaced. A quest for self-improvement spiraled into a desperate battle for life, a conflict that Lauren Robinson would not survive. Garrett Robinson stood by his wife's side as they crossed the threshold of the facility. He championed her desire to reclaim her body after the toll of multiple pregnancies. Inside those sterile walls, she underwent a complex suite of procedures, including breast revision, a gluteal lift, and fat removal, completed in a single 3-hour session. The surgery utilized spinal anesthesia, which investigators later discovered had been tainted. To her loved ones, the entire process appeared entirely unremarkable. She anticipated a renewed sense of self. But within the Maduro's clinic, a predatory pathogen lay in wait, an invisible menace that remained hidden until the window for salvation had closed. Unbeknownst to her, that specific medical center was a focal point for a lethal fungal meningitis surge. She was destined to become another statistic. Initially, the recovery seemed flawless as she traveled back to Vidor and attempted to slide back into her familiar routines. Once home, she joined her children for fishing trips and re-entered the workforce, desperately clinging to a sense of normalcy. However, Her physiology soon began emitting urgent warnings of an internal collapse. Agonizing cranial pressure and photophobia emerged, manifesting as debilitating migraines that left her weeping. Nausea and cognitive fog followed. Garrett realized these were not the typical side effects of a standard recovery. The ailments intensified rapidly. Even with professional intervention, her physical state continued to crumble. Medical experts eventually uncovered the grim reality of her affliction. Lauren was battling fungal meningitis, a savage infection sparked by non-sterile equipment used during her sedation. This pathogen invades the spinal column, aggressively targeting the central nervous system and the brain. Specialists at UTMB in Galveston performed exhaustive fluid analyses, desperately seeking a way to halt the infection's progress. Regardless of their intensive care, Lauren's vital signs continued their steady decline. 4 strokes ravaged her brain within weeks, draining her vitality. Eventually, a mechanical ventilator became her only lifeline. Perhaps most chilling was the realization that Lauren's nightmare was merely one part of a larger pattern. Federal health officials verified that 17 other Texans had contracted the same illness in Matamoros, Mexico. Establishments like Riverside Surgical Center and Clinica Cane Gay were flagged as sources and subsequently shuttered. Nationally, the scope of the crisis was expanding. More than 200 citizens remained under medical surveillance, victims of a latent biological threat disguised as beauty. For Lauren Robinson, time was a luxury she no longer possessed. As her kin sought divine intervention, the fungus took hold. Even the most advanced therapies failed to slow her body's systematic failure. A combination of neurological trauma and widespread infection finally broke her physical resilience. Garrett lived in a perpetual state of dread, mourning the woman she once was while fearing her ultimate departure. The passage of time felt like a relentless sentence for a choice that was never supposed to be lethal. Ultimately, the most devastating revelation was yet to come. On May 31, 2023, her struggle ended in Galveston, Texas. She left behind a husband and 4 small children, leaving a local community reeling from the senseless loss. She was only 29. We now provide a somber conclusion to the investigation we launched 7 days ago. A Vida resident confirmed the passing of his spouse today, sharing the agonizing news across social media platforms. Lauren stands as one of the 17 confirmed cases currently linked to this regional health crisis. Health authorities traced the contamination back to medical facilities in Matamoros, utilizing specific spinal numbing agents. Her pursuit of aesthetic enhancement led her directly into the heart of this medical disaster. In earlier interviews, Garrett detailed the subtle, sickening decline that began shortly after they returned home. He now advocates for extreme caution, hoping to spare other families from the hollow grief he now carries. He issues a desperate plea for others to intervene when their loved ones consider such risks, urging a firm refusal to anyone tempted by these procedures. The ultimate price is simply too high to pay. Federal and state medical authorities are now advising the public to scrap any upcoming operations in Matamoros, as investigators link 2 specific clinics to a deadly outbreak. Riverside Surgical Center and Clinica K3 were identified as the sources of the infection before both were shuttered that May. The Texas Department of State Health Services partnered with federal disease experts to launch a deep-dive investigation into the crisis. Their mission focused on pinpointing the exact origin of the biological contamination. They aimed to halt the rising death toll and hold the negligent parties accountable for their lethal shortcuts. Official alerts were broadcast to American citizens, demanding the cancellation of all medical travel to Matamoros until the biological threat was neutralized. Experts stressed that every patient treated at those facilities from January through May 2023 required immediate testing, regardless of whether they felt ill. The medical warnings were chilling, noting that while fungal meningitis is an anomaly, its presence is almost always a death sentence. Law enforcement south of the border moved in quickly to padlock the doors of every clinic connected to the sickness. This cross-border collaboration highlighted a grim reality. This was no longer a local issue, but an international emergency. What began as a series of isolated cases evolved into a global health crisis as investigators traced the pathogen back to those 2 Matamoros sites. After analyzing hundreds of medical files and biological samples, the investigative team uncovered a truly disturbing scene. Standard hygiene protocols were systematically ignored, and critical surgical tools were never properly decontaminated. Patients who underwent cosmetic work involving spinal anesthesia were essentially walking into a trap set by catastrophic institutional neglect. Public health agencies worked tirelessly to reconstruct a list of every single person who might have been exposed. They tracked down individuals from Texas and beyond, pleading with them to seek life-saving preventative care. Regional hospitals braced for an influx of victims as doctors were retrained to spot the subtle, early signs of the fungus. The data confirmed 17 infections in Texas alone, while another 212 Americans remained under intensive medical observation. The sheer scale of the tragedy exposed a broken system, proving the extreme dangers of seeking discount surgery in unregulated environments. Though she once proudly displayed her transformation, 29-year-old Lauren Robinson was about to lose everything in the pursuit of beauty. As a mother of 4, she only wanted to correct a previous, failed enhancement that had left her physically scarred. She chose a facility in Matamoros, Mexico, to undergo the corrective operation. The area is notorious for its cut-rate medical prices and questionable safety standards. Lauren filmed her entire experience, documenting her body just before the surgery. Records show her journey south and include a photograph taken alongside her husband in the clinic immediately following the 3-hour procedure. The operation included not only the breast revision, but also a Brazilian butt lift and extensive liposuction. Initially, her recovery seemed perfect. In a later interview, her husband described a woman who appeared to be back to her normal self. She returned to her job and even enjoyed a family fishing trip, seemingly healthy and full of life. However, shortly after that trip, her health collapsed as she was hit by agonizing migraines that left her incapacitated and in tears. As the symptoms began to manifest, her husband, Garrett, wondered if they were seeing the first signs of a disaster. They quickly deduced that her deteriorating state was a direct result of the medical trip to Mexico. Unbeknownst to them, a biological timer was counting down inside her. Doctors eventually diagnosed her with a rare, aggressive fungal meningitis. Investigators believe the pathogen entered her system through tainted anesthetic drugs or surgical equipment that had not been cleaned. The process of injecting medicine into the spinal canal is delicate. Any impurity on the needle introduces a direct path for infection. Once a fungus or contaminant enters the spinal fluid, it triggers the life-threatening inflammation known as meningitis. Lauren's body began to shut down after 4 separate strokes, eventually forcing doctors to place her on life support. By May 31st, a mere 3 months after her surgery, Lauren's fight for survival had reached a critical breaking point. Federal reports now confirm 17 suspected cases of meningitis tied to Mexican clinics, with 212 other citizens currently being monitored. Her husband now shares a haunting message, begging others to stay away from such dangerous medical shortcuts. No physical transformation is worth the sacrifice of one's own life. For those Lauren left behind, the official investigation provided answers but offered no comfort for their loss. While the government worked to prevent more fatalities, Lauren's 4 children were already motherless, leaving a grieving husband to pick up the pieces. The family now carries a heavy, 2-fold burden of grief and anger. They are forced to mourn her while living with the knowledge that her quest for self-improvement ended in a fatal betrayal by a broken system. Her small children faced a future stripped of the maternal figure who served as their entire universe. While drowning in sorrow, Garrett Robinson bore the heavy burden of navigating his toddlers through a psychological nightmare far beyond their understanding. Lauren's passing impacted more than just her kin. Within Vidor, a collective grief took hold for a vibrant mother whose clock was stopped far too soon. Her final tribute spoke of an irreparable hole left in many lives. As vigils were held, the neighborhood mobilized to shield her widower and offspring. On a broader scale, her story sparked a grim dialogue on the risks of medical tourism. Specialists issued stark warnings about pursuing surgery in foreign clinics that lack rigorous regulatory scrutiny. Financial incentives proved seductive, yet the hidden costs were often fatal as the global surgery trend exploded. Statistically, Thailand remains the premier destination for these seekers, followed closely by Mexico. With aesthetic enhancements becoming more affordable, a growing demographic is crossing international lines to go under the knife. To what extent does the bottom line dictate the decision to seek treatment on foreign soil? Cost is the primary driver. Once reserved for the wealthy elite, plastic surgery has been democratized for the average working class. Patients now hunt for surgical options, attainable through a few months of savings, mirroring the luxury transformations once exclusive to the Hollywood stars. Lauren Brooke Robinson's expiration was no freak accident. It was a single thread in a larger, lethal tapestry. She joined a growing list of victims claimed by a quiet predator, fungal meningitis, harvested in the operating rooms of Matamoros, Mexico. A quest for physical rebirth morphed into a trans-border nightmare, tearing through families and leaving whole towns in mourning. By early 2023, Texas medical investigators detected a sinister trend emerging from the shadows. Individuals who had recently sought aesthetic modifications in Matamoros, Mexico, presented with agonizing migraines and systemic failures. The discovery was chilling: a rare, lethal, fungal meningitis. When the dust finally settled, 7 women were dead, 6 Americans, and 1 Mexican national. Conflicting data suggests the body count could be as high as 12 out of 24 verified cases. Whatever the final tally, this remains one of the most fatal incidents ever tied to the offshore medical industry. The profile of the deceased mirrored Lauren. Young women in their prime, many with children left behind. They ventured to Matamoros for routine enhancements, liposuction, implants, or abdominal sculpting. The draw was undeniable: drastic discounts and the illusion of top-tier care just past the international boundary. However, the spinal blocks used during surgery hid a lethal secret equipment teeming with microscopic, parasitic fungal spores. After infiltrating the cerebrospinal fluid, the pathogen launches a swift, aggressive assault. It ravages the delicate tissues encasing the central nervous system, with symptoms lying dormant for weeks post-operation. Blurred vision and nausea signaled the onset. By the time victims sought help, the rot had taken hold. 24 individuals were officially diagnosed during the crisis, resulting in 7 confirmed fatalities. Among the casualties were 6 Americans. The 50% mortality rate highlights the sheer brutality of this infection. Though concentrated in Texas, the fallout spread across several states. What made this particular pathogen so efficient at killing? While uncommon, fungal meningitis is catastrophic upon contact. Crucially, it lacks the contagiousness of its bacterial counterpart. It is a direct injection of poison through tainted instruments, leading to a grueling medical battle. Recovery demands months of intensive intravenous therapy. Yet, even with aggressive intervention, many do not survive. During this crisis, the window for survival slammed shut due to missed early warnings. Victims failed to link their illness to the operating table until the damage was irreversible. Beyond the cold numbers lay human faces. Families were shattered, parents buried children, and Lauren's 4 little ones were left in a world without their mother. Countless others shared this agony. This was no mere medical anomaly, it was a societal trauma that gutted entire neighborhoods. Lauren Robinson's fate stands as a grim warning of the steep price of cross-border bargains, highlighting the absolute necessity of clinical hygiene and oversight. This case reveals the human wreckage behind the data, proving how quickly trust turns to tragedy when safety is neglected. Her legacy will be carried forward in the hearts of her growing children. To her neighbors, her loss is an open scar, a permanent reminder of the urgent need for medical accountability. Lauren's fate serves as a chilling societal warning. Medical choices harbor silent dangers, requiring a heavy, calculated measure of caution. Lauren Brooke Robinson's memory lingers as a dark mystery. Join the investigation by leaving your analysis in the comments below. If this case intrigued you, engage with the report and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime, the high cost of a hollow promise. We live in a culture obsessed with the fix, a world that tells us our worth is tied to a reflection in the mirror. But the story of Lauren Robinson serves as a devastating reminder that the ultimate price of a bargain is often paid in blood and shattered hearts. Lauren wasn't just looking for a miracle. She was a devoted mother of 4, simply trying to reclaim a piece of herself. She trusted a system that prioritized profit over protection. In the shadows of an unregulated clinic, a silent predator lay in wait. When she sought a physical transformation, she inadvertently traded her entire future for a catastrophic clinical failure. The lesson here is etched in the grief of the husband and children she left behind. True restoration cannot be found on a discount operating table. Your life is not a commodity to be gambled for a lower price point. No aesthetic enhancement is worth the hollow silence of a home stripped of its anchor. Before you consider a medical shortcut, remember that to your family, you are already irreplaceable. Don't let the pursuit of a perfect body cost you the only life you have. Choose safety, choose presence, choose to stay for the people who love you exactly as you are.